Sponsored by Pride Roofing Construction.
Yep.
And Zen.
And Zin, and Bang,
Right.
whatever.
Bangs are better.
Bang's better. But if you want to send me a couple boxes for free.
Yeah.
All right, folks, welcome to our latest edition of Into the Lion's Den, sponsored by Pride Roofing and Construction. So today we're going to dive into a literature topic. So we've been talking a lot about leadership, development and leadership, ins and outs of it. Today we're going to be talking about management theories and management in general. And we thought it was the best, the best reference point, this nifty little book that's sitting right here, 13 Fatal Errors. This book is it's invaluable. If you're in a management or leadership position, it's basically the Holy Grail. It's going to tell you exactly what not to do if you're a leader, and if you avoid all these problems or these character flaws, you're probably a good leader. You're probably a good manager. So we're going to dive into that pretty headstrong today. But just as a little personal tidbit, I've used this in every management role that I've worked in for my professional career. I've gifted this book to, I guess I couldn't put a real number on it, but I know it's over 40 employees, and it has never done anything but serve to be a valuable tool for their growth in my relationship with them. So it's something I hold near and dear. I know Ryan's read this cover to cover a couple of times. I've definitely read it cover to cover a couple of times. I think we're the right people to talk about it. So
Yeah.
Where do we want to start on this one?
Well, I mean, I think we should just start. I think in the sake of the series and not being too long-winded, I mean, my idea was to go over 3 or so of the points each week, and then maybe do a summary video afterwards. So I think we just jump right in. I think this is published. It's technically an older book. On when it was published. We were just joking about the references on the back, but when you get an endorsement by Zig Ziglar, it's probably a fairly valuable business book.
Pay attention.
Yeah. But I think that people running businesses, I think the hardest positions to hire are managers. Especially multi-purpose managers or managers with dual function. I always lean on the side of like a sales manager type role. I firmly believe is one of the hardest positions at any job.
I would agree with that. I mean, it's really difficult when you're in a dual purpose role to be able to truly split your time 50-50 and
Right.
be able to nail it. Right. Generally, you fade to one side, and the other side fails, and then you recoup, readjust, pivot, and then the other side starts increasing while the other side's decreasing. It's a really difficult feat.
Yeah, I there was a podcast I was listening to a few weeks ago that was a guy that runs a very, very successful organization. They do coaching and things like business coaching, things like that. He's got 16 sales managers and then 4 sales directors and then 1 chief sales officer. He lightheartedly said, I will let go of my chief sales officer and directors of sales twice as fast as I would a sales manager because they're such an integral and you could say kind of woven in role where moving that position or changing that position is incredibly disruptive. But as you said, it takes multiple skill sets, somebody that's has very strong leadership qualities, but is also extremely disciplined. So I think that, we jump into that and touch on our first point, which is of the 13 fatal errors. The first one, which we were talking about earlier in your office, which is most appropriately placed in my opinion. First one being, I think, the most important.
I agree.
Is the failure would be to refuse to accept personal accountability. So I always think of, we had a situation today where you deflect blame, right? Or try to blame something on somebody else, even though, like you've said in past videos, usually it comes down to a failure of managing in some way. I either didn't teach somebody something. It wasn't thorough enough. Maybe I just didn't do it right. And it's easy to blame somebody else, right? And taking away, accountability for yourself, but that will very quickly deteriorate and erode your, I don't want to say authority, but your position of stature in that company. So
I think you start to learn this one a little bit for like the longer you tenure, the more you understand how valuable it can be to be human and be vulnerable with your people, right? I think everybody's first impression of getting like an authoritative role, or not impression, but just thought process when taking an authoritative role is like, well, shit, I'm supposed to be the guy that knows everything.
Right.
I'm supposed to be the guy that has all the answers. I'm the expert now. Even though chances are usually you get thrown into it out of a chaotic event like the loss of the person who was previously in that role, or them being transplanted somewhere else into the organization or elevating or whatever. But most of the time you're not actually ready for the management role. Right. I think that's one of the reasons it's the first one. And so they put this facade on where they're going to fake it till they make it. Right. And so if you say refusal to accept personal accountability, if they think that they're supposed to have all of the answers, they're under this like unnecessary stress caused by their personal insecurities to show themselves as somebody who has all the answers.
Right.
So when they're slinging it, right, and they're just like making things up as they go, it causes an extraordinary amount of ripples in the world around you and the people who report to you, right? So we put this, or you put together this little template, but like, actually, I'm going to go to a different point first. In the book, I remember this one very vividly. It says the two most powerful statements that a manager can make in order of how powerful they are is, I don't know.
Right.
And then the second one is, but let's find out together.
Right.
Right. So in the first statement, when you say, I don't know, you kind of level set the scenario where you're like, they understand that you're not somebody who's going to BS them or try to control them or to manipulate them. You're showing a character of being able to be vulnerable, but confidently vulnerable, right? So they know they can, and humble, and they can trust you in that interaction. So you're already establishing trust. And then when you say, but let's find out together, right? Instantaneously, they're like, wow, this is a growth place. This is somewhere where we're going to learn together. And this is somebody I can trust who's going to go in the trenches with me and figure stuff out, right? Yep. So now I got my swim buddy, and I've got somebody who's confident enough to show me their flaws,
right?
Which is very powerful. I mean, those two statements, you wouldn't think that that's the most powerful thing that you could say as a manager is, I don't know.
Right.
Right. But really, when people are looking at you for answers, they're going to know who you are, which is somebody who's with them through the thick and thin, regardless of how hard it is.
Well, it's amazing how powerful the statement of I don't know is. Just because of the amount of fear that some people have in saying that. Right? Whereas like, I mean, I can remember 4 instances in the last 2 weeks where I've had somebody come to me and ask me a question, and my answer is, I'm not sure. But let's go in so-and-so's office and figure it out. Right? And it's I look at like, it's the other side of taking accountability, more or less, instead of like the very, open-ended side of taking ownership for, obviously, if you're a manager, you have either someone or a team under you, and absorbing those teams' failures, right? As the manager, I think that unless it's egregious, but like, the general expectations not being met, I think it's your job to shoulder that, right? But the other side, in my opinion, of taking personal accountability is understanding, like you said, that me not knowing is okay, right? And me demonstrating that it's not okay, or that it is okay that I don't know, shows a tremendous amount of unspoken humility, as well as, like you said, mutual growth, right? So but I mean, I've personally had so many managers that the answers that they give me are incorrect. And I'm like, and then I get in trouble. And I'm like, I did exactly what I was told to do.
Yeah, and those same managers who gave you the wrong information probably are like, I didn't tell you that.
Right.
You must have misheard me. I didn't tell you
Which
that.
is the antithesis of personal accountability.
Exactly.
Right? It's the complete opposite.
Right.
So
when we talk about the other side of it, not just like the position where you show your cards and that you're wanting to grow with your team, right? And you're not the know-it-all, but then you go to the other side, which is like actually accepting responsibility for a problem.
right.
Any well-functioning business has one channels of like delivery mechanisms, right? So it's trickle down management. Ideas start here, they trickle down and are managed, and then however many layers that there are. But when the problem arises, the accountability funnels up. Right. And if it stays that way, you have a fluent body that's connected from brain to toe, from brain to stomach to brain to whatever.
Yep.
Right. Everything works together, and there's always a communication opportunity.
Right.
Right. And if you don't have that, where there's somebody in one of those levels who refuses to acknowledge when they make a mistake, communication stops.
Right.
And if communication stops inside your body, things start dying.
Yeah, they break.
Right. They break.
Yeah.
Right? It's just this. It's the same way in a business, right? If you model a business after a cell or just a human body,
Right.
there's energy drivers. There are the support, the bones that hold it together. There is a nucleus that sends the signals, whereas there's the receptors that accept the signals, and so on and so forth. So like, I won't go too nerdy on this one, but if you don't have accountability in any one of those individual layers, whole sections of the body are going to be ultimately affected.
Right.
And when that whole section of the body is affected, what happens if your leg falls off?
Right.
Right? You're going to have to learn how to walk on one leg.
Right.
You're going to have to get crutches. You need some kind of exterior support or whatever. Or God forbid, it's something internal that's even more valuable, like
Right.
your digestive system or circulation or something, right? So it's really valuable to be able to keep constant communication flow and accountability on all levels of an organization. So the three pieces that we put down on the paper for this one. So the failure, the 13 or the error, fatal error is the refusal to accept the personal accountability. But what does it cause? It impacts team morale.
Right.
It erodes trust with an organization, and it's a barrier to learning and improvement. So
Right.
we already touched on one of them, but I think we'll go backwards just because we already touched on it. But barrier to learning and improvement. If you're not owning up to mistakes as a manager, you and your entire team, not just the individual that you're communicating with, are now going to be affected, and you're going to lose all opportunity to grow as a unit.
Right.
Right. It's a pretty. I've seen it happen a lot of times through different professions with different, different people in their different places or different businesses that I've worked for or owned or whatever. But it's like you become stagnant as a unit the second there's one person who's a bad egg.
Yep.
Right. And so the barrier to learning and improvement is exactly you. If you decide not to be accountable to an error and show your team, I'm confident with myself enough to say, I screwed this one up, but I'm going to fix it. And then I'm going to use this as a learning lesson and to help you guys avoid this problem from now on. If you don't do that, you don't have those learning lessons. You don't create opportunities where your team members, A, trust you, and B, want to go to the pits with you.
Right.
Right. So you probably go into the erosion of trust section.
Yeah.
Touched on it. But
I think that, a good, very simple example is the one we kind of jokingly used before of, the manager who says, do this. And then, the person that reports to them does that and then gets in trouble. And then that manager says, I didn't tell you to do that. And it's, in my opinion, that's not even an erosion. That's a complete fracture, right? Because then it affects an employee in multiple ways. One, they become afraid to go to you, right? Because they are unclear of which direction they get being the appropriate direction or the inappropriate direction or the right or wrong thing. It completely ruins their confidence in your ability as well as your leadership, right? And then what that employee is then going to do next is then look for their answers from somebody who isn't their manager, right? So they're going to, either overstep or laterally step to somebody else to try to find, said answer to whatever problem it is or solution to whatever problem they have, and not necessarily get the correct version, right? Because it's either one from somebody who's an untrained manager, or maybe if they overstep their manager and go to their manager's manager, right? Then we have a upper level manager being pinned against a lower level manager, right? And then you get friction at the management level, right? So I look at like the first thing or the best thing that I can do as somebody who manages people is if somebody comes to me with a problem and they say, I'm struggling with X, or I did this and this was wrong and I got reprimanded in this way, or I keep messing this up, what are some solutions? My first question internally, and then I usually voice it a little bit differently externally, but and it's the same thing that you ask yourself, is like, where did I fail? Right? Or if this is something that they should know, where did I fail in not teaching them thoroughly enough, or maybe in a way that they understood, right? Or I'll ask that person, what do you need from me to understand this better, right? Or do you need some specific time to go through this so that we have a better understanding of it, whatever that may be? Or, like in the position where I am here, right, I will intentionally, even if I have the answer, say, you should go to your direct report for that answer, right? Because I don't want there to be a fracture of trust between me and the person I'm managing, right? Where it's like, why do they keep skipping over me to go to you, right? So I think that, I think at the end of the day, I look at some of the people that I manage in here, and then some of the team under me or under my management, and if I was to come at them for something they're struggling with and put them down for it, right? And be like, why are you not performing in X, right? Or your numbers aren't meeting what we want them to meet. You need to pick up the pace, whatever that is. In my opinion, I'm deflecting some accountability, right? So I usually go to it as like an open brainstorming, right? I'm like, what can we do better for you, right? If I can do this better for you, can you do this better for me, right? And it's a negotiation, right? Which, in my opinion, garners trust, right? Then you build trust. Like, I'm willing to do this if you're willing to do that, right?
Well, I think that a lot can be said from somebody who's accountable to an error,
Right.
Not just from bottom up in terms of the people you're managing, but top down in terms of the business that you're working for, right? If you're willing to address an error that you made, whether it was subconsciously or consciously, right? You didn't know or you did know or whatever, and you say, this is what I did and this is why, you become much more of a valuable tool.
Right.
I'm not say everybody's a tool, but you become much more utilized within an organization because it's understood that you're not going to back away from a problem.
Right.
And I like the fracture piece, the visualization that comes with the fracture, because if you're looking at it through like, what's the actual organization's effect? What are the repercussions for the organization when these fractures happen? Well, we could probably list off 100 different things, but generally it boils down to lack of foot speed.
Right.
Nobody wants to do their job because they don't care about the person that they're working for.
Right.
It's a common saying in management that people don't leave businesses, they leave their manager. Right. So if you've got a manager who's not taking accountability or not creating an environment of trust and learning and those types of things, people don't want to work there anymore. Right. As much as they like the job or the logo or the car that they've been issued out or whatever that it is, it's like they don't want to work there anymore because they got to deal with this dickhead for X amount of time, right? So it fractures, in terms of productivity dwindles, creates internal quarrels. It creates, witch hunts. It creates everything and anything that it possibly can. So the fracture or the erosion of trust is, it's a big deal. You got to be able to trust your team members. We're not going to war
Right.
right? So it's not like we need somebody covering our six because, Charlie's in the
die.
bushes.
Yeah.
It's more or less like we need to be able to trust each other, that I've got your back and you've got mine. And when I have a troubled client, I know that I have support.
Right.
Or when I have a problem in my job, my project, whether I started it or created it or I didn't, it just evolved.
Right.
I have some support to get through this with my team members, right? You're not going to feel that way with a manager who can't say, you know what, I screwed up.
Right.
Right.
Which, I mean, the more you do, the easier it is.
Mhm.
Right. And it's, I'm just lucky to be, I've always been fairly comfortable being like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Right.
Mhm.
So, but I think that people take on the idea that being in a management position, they are supposed to know everything.
Mhm.
But I think the truth is that nobody really knows much,
Mhm.
and everybody's trying to just figure things out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so is the owner. It's just the way that it is. It's like we're all trying to grow together. It's important that we all understand we're humans,
Right.
right, and admit that we're humans.
Yeah.
Right? You get the megalomaniacs and the, insecure betas and whatever
Right.
terminology you want to give to it. It's like flexing out a problem ain't gonna make it go away.
No. No, it'll usually inflame it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So do we want to dive into another one, because we've stuck with this one for a while, or do we want to
I
split
think-
them up?
No, I think let's do two.
Okay.
So I think that, we could just do two at a time, but I think this one's great. The second one is fail to develop people. Another way you could, look at that is inhibiting or capping growth,
Mhm.
right? Which kind of lends into that megalomaniac type person that you just mentioned. But I mean, it's like, I'm going to sit up here on this perch and you guys are going to stay down there.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And no matter what, you're always going to stay down there.
Yep.
Right.
That's usually a product of fear.
Yeah.
Or not even fear, it's insecurity that
Yeah.
leads to fear. Yeah.
Right.
So I don't have to go too in depth into that one, but that one hits home.
Yeah.
Given the relationship I had with my ex-business partner, that was something that I had to battle with him all the time,
Mhm.
which is he's an incredibly talented human, very
Right.
smart, very all of those things, but also very insecure.
Right.
And he always thought everybody was out to get him.
Right.
So it's like, let's not teach him everything so that they always need us for something.
Right.
Right. Which is it's just an
Slimy.
asinine thought. You
Yeah.
know, it's like, if you're not in a room full of people who are better at you at certain things, you're in the wrong room.
Yeah.
Right. You're the smartest guy in the room, find a new room.
Right. Or a bigger room.
Or a bigger room,
Yeah.
or whatever else. Right. So it's like, you do have to have a sense of confidence in self and security and what your weaknesses are and what your strengths are, in order to develop or to create a culture where you want to develop people.
Mhm.
I personally take the plight that, like, it's my duty in the position that I have, that I create an environment where everybody has the ability to become a better professional here.
Mhm.
So it's like we're a resume builder for them. It's like, I hope that their resume stays here.
Right.
But if it doesn't, I want to know that I had such a powerful impact that they took what they learned here and they got into a position that they would have never been in
Right.
without the time that they had here.
Yeah. That they level up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, what are you even doing this for if you don't create an opportunity to develop the people around you?
Or anything.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
the dollars and cents are cool,
Right.
but money comes and it goes. People are a lot more important than
Yeah.
a gold note.
Yeah. I mean, impact and development, I think, is what motivates us both, right? But I mean, like the three bullet points on these ones: the short-term focus with long-term consequences, underutilization of talent, which that one, in my opinion, is huge, and then creates a culture of mediocrity, which is also huge. But I mean, really, every new group of people that I bring through here and train, I mean, I tell them all from the get-go, my intention is to make you better at this position than I am. That's my goal, right? When I owned my gyms, everybody in the gym industry was always hyper reactive to, you'd own this gym and then 2 blocks down a new gym would come and they would be like, oh my God,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like they're going to compete with us and steal our people and this and this and this. And every employee I ever had, I said, my goal when you leave here would be that you could start something like this on your own.
Mm-hmm.
That's my intention, right? I want you guys to be able to do this because the position that you're in right now is not a career path, right? It's a very difficult position to make any sort of livable wage, right? Personal training is rough, right? So my intention was like, I want you guys to become as successful or more successful than me. That's my goal, right? The way you do that usually is gym ownership, right? So, but I didn't have any problem speaking that I was training my competition, I guess you'd say. I think it's a little bit different in this industry because I think the barrier of entry is lower in this industry and people are a lot more greedy. Where I come from in the general health and wellness field, it's people care about people.
It's a bleeding heart industry.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, I want to help as many people as I can help. If I step in the way of that, I feel like I'm doing the world a disservice, right? In this industry, people are like, oh, I see money.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I had this conversation with a client a couple of days ago. It's kind of off rabbit trail, but he said, it seems like this is kind of an easy industry to get into. And I was like, it's not. And he goes, no offense. And I was like, none taken. It was very easy to step foot into the industry.
Right.
It's like if you have any form of sales acumen, you can get into this industry. What's not easy is staying in the industry.
Right.
What that requires is intestinal fortitude, focus, obsession, and a keen ability to strategize with cash flow.
Right.
You have to be able to plan, and not just plan for tomorrow. You have to be able to plan for weeks from now, right? Months from now,
Right.
the whole year. You got to know with ebb and flow. Right?
Right.
So it's no slight on that one, but it does. Understanding that, it brings in a different type of talent. So I think maybe this is a good, connecting piece to the second term. So when you wrote off underutilization of talent, I think that's one of the biggest issues that a lot of companies will have, is not getting to a point where they have like that culture of growth and openness where people's ideas are actually listened to and,
Right.
and that type of stuff. And you don't really find where people's talents truly are.
Right.
You don't give the opportunity to find out where they're going to shine. But that's that EOS, that entrepreneur operating system. It's like, let's find the right seat on the bus for the person. So
Right.
if we're going to take a chance to bring you into the organization, I want to utilize your talent. I want to find out exactly how you're going to serve the company's best interests. And in turn, I want to give you the ability to grow to be able to serve any interest that you want to with your professional development.
Right.
Right. Period. Right. So like insto facto, here's our contract. I'm going to pay you. You're going to do this. I'm going to use you. You're going to use me.
Right.
And we're both going to get to our goals and we're both going to be better.
Right.
Yep. Right. So, but the underutilization of talent, I think, is one of the biggest downfalls of a lot of companies. And a lot of times people in management roles look at talent like it's a threat. And that's a really bad place to be in, right? If you look at somebody because they are better than you, like they are your competition, what changes about your relationship with them?
Well, it immediately becomes, it's not a growth relationship at that point. It becomes constricted, right? You start keeping things from them, right? You start blurring the lines a little bit or not being, forthright with all the information that you have,
Right.
right? Because you're afraid that person might take your position.
It's like you're targeting them.
Right.
Like, and when it's negative, let's make it seem like it's their fault. When
Right.
it's positive, let's make it seem like it's my fault.
Right.
Right. And a manager has more of the ear of either upper level management or the owners or whatever level that they're at. So it's
Right.
not like you're going to hear the right story about it if a manager is, I guess, the rotten egg.
Right. Yeah, I was having a conversation with one of the guys we brought on who came from the solar industry, and we want to talk about a massive underutilization of talent, right? Is that he said that the predominant model now for solar companies and solar sales positions specifically is that they build them on a 10-week revolving door. And the purpose for that is that they don't want them to reach the higher commission level position, right? So they intentionally keep them under crazy restrictions, right? And at 10 weeks, they do a review, right? And find a reason to let them go, regardless of their talent,
It
right?
would be awful to be the recruiting and training manager.
Horrible.
It would be the worst job ever.
That's all he was doing, right? Week in, week out, training new reps.
Welcome to your newest professional death.
Right. You know, and right. And and I mean, he said to me, he said, the amount of people I saw come through that were very talented that I knew were being set up for failure. He was like, I couldn't be there any longer.
Yep.
He was like, he said, I felt like a stockbroker selling somebody a bad stock, right? Promising them the world and then knowing that it was going to crash.
Yeah.
Right. And understanding that I was about to put this person's money in a hole. Right. And I think that I like the, you know, seat on the bus that fits for them in that aspect where, you know, like we just had that happen with one person here that they had like a astonishingly high conversion metric in one specific area, right? And my thought was this person may be on the wrong seat right now, right? Like we could fully develop and keep using this skill set that he has and then allow him to grow into a different position more at his pace, a little bit slower, right? So because his one skill set was being squandered by the other stuff that he had to do. So it would look generally like his performance wasn't great, but when you break it down by period of the job, right? Or what his job duties were, in this job duty, he was outstanding, but better than anybody here. So it's like, why would I not pour gasoline on that fire?
Yeah.
Right. And develop him and keep his morale high.
Yeah.
Right. So, which I think kind of goes into the culture of mediocrity. It's like, you know, you keep people pinned down enough, it kind of becomes a organization of people performing at 30 to 50%, day in and day out.
You kind of become just what's that thing that the cars float on between islands, like a ferry?
The ferry, yeah.
Right. You kind of just become like this. All you are is just a middle piece to get them to the next spot. Right. When you don't develop people and give them a reason to want to invest into themselves and the company simultaneously, all they're doing is buying their time until the next opportunity is there, which is why revolving door businesses exist. Right. It's like, it might be part of the play, like the solar industry, where it's like, we just don't want to pay them what they're worth paying. So we're just going to keep using people like they're just a number.
Right.
Or it could be that, you know, the organization hasn't done enough time to investigate how to create a good culture where people feel like they're valued and where they feel like they want to actually show up, you know? Right. So.
Well, and take pride in what they do, right? And, you know, not everybody is intrinsically wired like you and I, for instance, where personal growth is insanely important to us, but they can absolutely be coached there. But to be coached there, they have to feel what it's like to feel that little bit of growth, and then it becomes addictive. And it's like, oh, my life just leveled up 10%, right? So my life levels up 10% now, and I wonder what 20% would feel like, right? And you have to be able to create a culture for them to where that, you know, it's like you look at results in a gym, right? The first year you're going to have exponential growth. The next year you're going to have pretty substantial growth. By the time we get to year 7, 8, 9, we're looking at very incremental growth, like single percentages, 1 to 2%, 3 to 4%, maybe, right? But the same drive motivates us at this 2 to 3% from that first year of 40%, right? And it's like, oh, I remember what that was like. I can keep chasing that. And even though I'm only improving 1 or 2% now, the return on that 1 or 2% is greater than it was back here years ago when I got that huge jump, right? So, you know, creating a understanding, like you said, where people's talents are, and then utilizing those talents takes talent, right? To be able to notice those things in people, because a lot of people don't even notice them in themselves.
Right. So if we boil it down to the true error of the manager, I think the true error with this one, the failure to develop people, is really failing to know their personnel.
Right.
Right. Whether they were insecure in the job or just inept, just not the right person for the management position. If you don't know who your power players are and how to structure them to meet your goal, and then to exceed your goal,
Right.
and then to move your milestone further so that you're always reaching for more, you probably aren't the right guy for the job.
Right. Exactly.
let's just be real. So,
Yeah.
well, do you want to go over any more topics with all this? I think it was a pretty good
I
conversation.
think we're good. Yeah. I mean, I think that the one thing that I've always taken away from this book that I think is important to kind of wrap this up with is that management in any business, but I think that managing people or responsibilities or, tasks, whatever it is hard, right? That's why it's usually always a promotion, right? But I think that not enough people take it seriously.
Yeah.
So, but it's like the team that I manage is like my posse, right? It's like my little gang, right? And it's like I want to do everything I can to protect them, and then help them grow, right? And if there's any sort of disruption or feelings of, misplacement or, that they're lagging a little bit, or maybe they're declining, or whatever that may be, I take that very seriously, right?
Well, when you're a powerful manager and you take it seriously, and your team members will begin to embody the same characteristics you
Right.
have. So your job becomes easier the more you perfect it.
And the better you manage.
So it's like,
Yeah.
you know how to set the tone with the first couple of guys, but when your team turns from 2 into 5 into 10 or whatever that it is, they all take like the older brother type of approach, and they start to take little brother under their wing and start doing the same things that you taught them. And then when you get your next movement, or you get your lateral movement, or for whatever, maybe you leave, you've already done your job. You've literally created a copy of yourself, at least one of them, if not multiples, and it's real easy for the seamless transition to the next milestone.
Agreed.
Right. But I did make an error at the beginning of this video. It's not just called 13 Fail Errors. It's called the 13 Fail Errors that managers can make and how not to make them. It's by Stephen Brown. I highly recommend getting this book and reviewing it. Any of our avid listeners, we're going to go over at least 3 and 4 in the next video. So maybe you can follow up, ask some questions, engage in the content. We'd love to get some questions and turn this into something where we're all growing.
Yeah, I mean, and if you watch this and you're ever curious to, I think we had a lady a few weeks ago stop in, and she was like, "I watch your videos." If we're here and you stop in, we'll sit down and have a cup of coffee with you and talk about anything you want to talk about. So
yeah, we'll even sit in this cool room.
Yeah, yeah.
Open invitation. You'll be on our next podcast.
Yeah. But we appreciate it if you're watching and follow along for the next few videos where we'll go over, all of these and hopefully you learn something if you're, 19 years old managing people at Menchie's Frozen Yogurt, or if you're, 40, 45 years old managing, 60 people somewhere at some big corporation, So
it's all relevant.
Yeah.
It's all universal.
Yeah.
Let's become better managers, better leaders, better people. Catch you on the next one.